Welcome to OCTO TALK, where we explore the latest trends, innovations and insights in the world of technology. I'm your host, Ash Richardson, and today we're going to be diving into AI-powered security. So join us as we speak with industry experts, thought leaders, and our very own chief technologists to bring you cutting-edge developments that are shaping the future of tech. So let's get started. I'm joined today by Paul Elovic, our solution leader for security. And today, Paul, we're going to be talking about AI-powered security. So I'm really interested to get your thoughts on why is it important and what is it really all about?
Okay, so to start off with a definition of what it is, as it sounds, it's basically using AI to improve the way we prevent attacks, we detect attacks that are happening, and then we recover from attacks. And we're going to look at it in two lenses. The first one is, how do we improve what we're doing at the moment in terms of controls? Okay. And the second one is, what new opportunities does AI open to do something different, to do it in a different way? Okay. So the reason it's important is, one of the main reasons is attackers are using AI. So they're getting faster, quicker, so we have to respond to that. There's a stat that I saw from Palo Alto, Unit 42, where it said in the last 3 years that the mean time to exfiltration, so that means from the time of compromise before they've got your data, it's gone from 9 days down to an average of 2 days, and in 50% of the time it's lower than 24 hours. So they're in and they're out. So you need to be able to respond at machine speed because they're attacking you at machine speed. Right. So AI can really help you to, I would say, stay one step ahead, but that's always very difficult because the attackers, don't forget, they have no rules. They don't have to go through compliance. They don't have to go through lots of testing. They can just point and click and try stuff out. So it's a bit of an arms race, and we've got a lot to do to keep up with attackers.
Excellent. Well, thanks for that. One thing I'm really interested in, though, I'm the chief technologist for Workplace at Computacenter here. So I deal with a number of different what we call domains of work. Right? So we look after people in the HQ, people that work behind desks, people like you and I. That's one domain of work, and that's traditionally what we've seen, organisations protecting. Increasingly, we're seeing, and there's a stat, again, talks about 80% of workers are frontline workers. So we have this second domain of work, frontline workers, that we also need to think about, the information, the data and tools that they use and how we protect that. And then we also have a third domain of work that we're looking at, which is intelligent edge. So when we think about those three domains of work and how information and data is being passed between them at different points of attack potentially, what can we do to help protect in terms of AI security across those three domains of work?
So just to make sure the listeners understand, give me an example of a frontline worker and give me an example of an intelligent edge application.
So let's take a retail setting. Okay. So you might have a frontline worker might be someone that's working in a store, someone that maybe it's working in maybe the warehouse, and they need to get obviously information data between them. You also then have, if you think about intelligent edge, let's take a retail store as an example. If we carry on that example, you may have someone then that's let's take, for instance, shelf edge labeling. Okay, so I have the ability then to be able to change pricing and to provide information. It can also be something like a kiosk where I get self-service from a customer perspective. Okay. So you see there's a few different areas there where one, as an individual, I might be putting my information and data into a point of sale terminal. I may have to interact with someone in the store to ask for information. So you can see there that there's opportunities for someone to maybe get hold of data, for data to be able to leak between those different areas. So it's really important that we protect, both people that are being served by our customers, but also people that work in those different domains.
Okay, so I'll address the first two domains because there's a lot of similarities there, and I'll point out the differences, and then we'll come on to the intelligent edge. Okay. So in terms of users, either in the HQ or even sitting at home or sitting in a coffee shop, there are, I would say, 4 main domains where workplace security concentrates. The first one is email and email hygiene. So there are various stats, but I've seen stats that say 80%. I've seen some come as low as 30%, but a lot of attacks start with phishing and some sort of compromise. Yeah. So email hygiene is on the agenda of most CISOs today, right? Very high on the agenda. So in terms of AI, what AI can do in terms of email hygiene, there are some really good solutions out there that not only improve the way they can detect bad emails, not only do they learn as they go, one of the key advantages is reducing false positives. So we see a lot of our customers have implemented solutions and they need an army of operators to deal with releasing emails from quarantine, dealing with false positives. There are some solutions out there that really reduce false positives down from the high sort of 70, 80% down to less than 5%. And that is amazing in terms of cost efficiency, but also in terms of user experience, right? Because the last thing you want to do is having to contact your help desk to get an email removed all the time. So, email hygiene is very much an area where AI is helping. The next one is what we call EDR solutions. So your EDR solutions, your endpoint detection and response, that's really an evolution from the old antivirus systems you used to have. But what they're doing is actually working on your device, say your laptop, looking for events, looking for correlations, detecting anomalies, and then they have the ability to respond to those anomalies, right? What I'll throw in there as well is ITDR, sorry, lots of acronyms, but that is identity threat defense and response.
Okay.
So what we're seeing is a real increase in the amount of attacks that start with not somebody hacking into your systems, but somebody logging into your systems with compromised credentials. And compromised credentials are quite often hard to detect. So it can be up to a year before somebody realizes their credentials have been compromised, and that attacker has access throughout that period. So once again, you've got to be able to identify that the credentials have been compromised. So that's to detect again, and then you've got to be able to respond. Now, what AI can do really well is correlate lots of different information to make the effectiveness of your EDR and your ITDR solutions increase. But what they can also do is, especially in the ITDR space, they can monitor what attackers are doing, so understand how they behave and feed that back into the systems so you can watch out for indicators of compromise. So you've seen something that an attacker does, you've seen it happening on your systems, or you've seen an identity used in that way, and you're far more able to say, well, actually, that looks suspicious, I'm going to go and do something about that.
Okay.
So I've spoken about email, spoken about EDR and ITDR, and the last one I want to concentrate on is access.
Okay.
So intelligent access to your network or intelligent access to cloud solutions. There are SSE solutions. So SSE, Secure Service Edge, is a bit of a mouthful, but a key component of SSE is Zero Trust Network Access. And that means it's basically a VPN replacement, but a very clever VPN replacement. So you access your systems. You can access based on lots of different parameters. So I could say, if somebody's sitting in an office, let them log in using their Windows credentials, I trust them. If somebody is in a coffee shop or if somebody's in a location I don't expect them to be, I want to use some second factor of authentication. I may need them to use a hardware token, so you can get as intelligent as that. And one of the key things about that is in terms of zero trust. So one of the key tenets of zero trust is only giving people access to what they need access to. So I could be a standard worker. So when I've logged in using ZTNA, there is no need for me to have access to the back end of the finance system.
Yeah.
There's no need for me to have access to any sort of database. I need access to the front end of my HR system, front end of my email systems, and that's all I'm given access to. So ZTNA is really key in terms of protecting those workplace users, but it really comes into its own when you're dealing with those frontline workers, right? So they sometimes may work in an office, but if they're working on the shop floor and it's the shop that they're used to, then you'd probably give them standard type of access. If suddenly they're logging in from a different country or different location, then you may want to think, adapt to that access a bit. Let's see what they're really doing and ask for more credentials. So those are the areas where AI can really help, because it's typically what AI is really good at is getting lots of different data from lots of different sources, correlating that and making decisions on whether something is normal or not, and taking action around that.
The question I've got for you then is, I've seen some of these AI solutions where people are not experts in some of the tools that they're using, but they're using things like natural language to be able to interact with them, to be able to do things on the network. Can you tell me a bit more about that? What have you seen there, and how is that advantageous for organisations?
Okay, I think the most advantageous example I've seen is in the SSE space. So the promise of SSE, where you have a unified policy, which means that you can set up one policy that controls access to your network, access to your cloud resources, it controls your data loss prevention policies, it controls your access to the internet, to web browsing sites, and that unified policy is the holy grail, because otherwise you're configuring policy in 10 different places, and it's really difficult to take the intent, the company intent, and turn that into policy.
Yeah. What
AI is good at, and what a lot of vendors are implementing into their solution, is natural language policy definition.
Okay.
So you would say, let's take a DLP example. I don't want anybody to be able to upload confidential data to Dropbox.
Right.
So it will take that, define policy. If you're using an SSE solution and you've got unified policy, it should be able to define one policy or a group of policies that work together. But even if you're using lots of disparate solutions, AI is still going to be able to help you to define policy for each of those systems, although that's going to be a lot more difficult. And it's a massive advantage, because what we find with our customers, a lot of customers, it takes not months but years to start to realise the benefit of the policy, the benefit of the business cases that they put together at the start in terms of, and policy definition is a very, very difficult thing to do.
Excellent. We talked about a few of the advantages of AI, but I see lots of situations where maybe there's some pitfalls. So can you tell us a bit about the things that we need to look out for if we're going down and looking at how we use AI-powered security tools?
Okay. So to me, the first one is understanding what you're trying to achieve. Okay. I went to a talk last night where there was a industry, in fact, the founder of LinkedIn, talking about AI, and he was talking about the best way to learn is to play.
Yeah.
Right. In a corporate environment, it's a bit different. You can't just give lots of people lots of tools and get them to play the security concerns amongst other things. So, and it can be a little bit like a solution looking for a problem.
Yeah.
So understanding the use cases that you're trying to achieve, starting small, understanding the use cases, where you're going to get most bang for your buck, what's achievable, and having some sort of corporate program to help people to take advantage of AI is crucial. So for instance, something as simple as Copilot, you just give 3,000 people Copilot licenses. Some of them will do the training, start making really effective use of it. Other people will bumble around with it. Some people just won't use it. So understanding those use cases is crucial. And then in terms of taking advantage of AI, you need to make sure that your organization's ready. So an AI readiness assessment is something, because most companies need help in this space, right? It's a new space, and there are experts out there who can help. So an AI readiness assessment is what we advise our customers to do, to understand the barriers to them taking on AI and what they need to do it effectively. And underlying that is a data assessment. Yeah. You're only, if you're building AI systems, you're only as good as your data. And most people definitely need help with their data. Firstly, understanding what data they have that they can take advantage of, but making sure that data is effective. So so I suppose, to summarize, make sure you understand what you're trying to achieve. Make sure your organisation is ready to take on AI, and thirdly, make sure your data is good enough to realise those objectives.
Okay, that sounds good. So if we kind of take everything that we've spoken about so far, and an organisation then wants to start using these tools, what would your advice be? Where should they start? What kind of things should they think about, and how can they make the best use, or make the best plans to make best use of AI-powered security?
Okay, so in the workplace space, which we talked about, I suppose it's a decision. I think it's an easy decision myself for most companies of whether you buy or build, right? Most companies aren't going to have the resources to go and build, AI-powered security in the workplace space. So typically, you're buying COTS products. So once again, in terms of those COTS products, they're going to be generating data. You're going to have to make sure you know how to operate those products. You're going to make sure that when you're choosing those products, you're choosing them based on use cases that you understand.
So identifying those up front.
Yeah, identify those up front is very, very key. And then in terms of, once again, going back to the AI readiness assessment and a data assessment, that's fundamental to everything you do, even if you are, in fact, especially if you're building your own solutions. So getting some help, and we work with some very large companies who have very large IT departments, but everybody needs help, right? This is a very complex space. You can waste a lot of time and a lot of money fumbling around. So I would say get some help, make sure you understand your use cases, but going back to the workplace things, be curious about your email security. Make sure that is a massive differentiator, right? EDR solutions tend to be a little bit more mature, I would say, but make sure you understand how you're doing with your EDR. And if you're not looking at SASE, and to be honest, everybody's looking at SASE or SSE, then have a look at that. Have a look at the use cases. And in terms of SSE, there's so much you can achieve. Start small. Make sure you understand what you're trying to achieve. A lot of companies start with ZTNA because it's such a compelling piece of technology that really helps a lot of company on their road to sort of a zero trust architecture. So I would say concentrate on those things, but above all, get some help. Get a roadmap, put a roadmap together, and then that will guide you towards your North Star over the coming months and years.
Excellent. So a question that we hadn't spoken about before, but I thought I'd ask you it because it's quite curious for me. If you look ahead, let's say 5-10 years, in terms of how AI will be used, both from an attack perspective and a detection perspective, what kind of things do you kind of think about, or have you seen in the future, as you consider where we might be going to?
So from my perspective, I think at the moment we've talked about the move from everybody being in an office to everybody, having smartphones and devices. I think in terms of, in the future, people will have agents, right? And agents, there'll be autonomous agents with a task in mind. So I might have an agent who's there to organise my diary, right? Or I might have an agent who, for instance, let's stick to security. So I might have an agent that looks at my laptop, decides that there's something anomalous going on from the EDR solution saying something's going wrong. I might be in a meeting somewhere, might raise a ticket on my behalf, right? So I think those agents are soon going to be, I say soon, 3 to 5 years, they're going to be the way we interact with all our systems. So, but once again, the attackers, right? If you're relying on an agent to do lots of different things for you, then I'm going to be working out how I can attack those agents and how I can own those agents. And I think the agentic AI and how individuals are going to use them is inevitable. So that means attackers wanting to compromise those agents is also inevitable. So that's one thing I see.
I agree. It's quite interesting. I think that whole, we've talked about these domains of work, right? And I also think about, in the future, in order for us to be able to be more effective at what we do, there's going to be a greater connection of platforms between personal and, let's say, work contexts. So as an example, if I choose to give access to my corporate organisation some of my personal data, so it could be my personal calendar, it could be my ability to book train tickets. So back to the kind of personal assistant bit, there's a lot more security context that could be at risk here. And I kind of think, quite often, how do we make sure that I mean, it's a kind of rhetorical question, but how do we make sure that as I give more access to different systems and I interconnect them so that I get a better experience, how do I then improve the security of it? And I think I've heard this term of digital human, and I think it's similar to what you were talking about in terms of the understanding of the platforms that I use in terms of how I use them, such that they can start to make decisions for me, is quite interesting and also worrying from a security perspective, because if I'm then empowering, and we come back to the edge kind of thing here, or agents, so if I'm empowering digital versions of me to do things, the security context around that needs to be really, really defined and understood. So I don't think we've got answers to that, but these are the kind of things that I'm thinking about in terms of how do I protect the people that work within those contexts of work, especially as they start to, we've already seen an overlap and a meshing of kind of personal and private life, since COVID and we've moved forward. I don't know whether you've got any thoughts on that, but that's kind of one of the things that I'm looking at for the future is, how are some of these security organisations going to support how we connect, and use data and information, across all these different platforms in the future?
Yeah, I think there's always going to be opportunity and risk. And I think in terms of what you're talking about, without some sort of intelligent assistant, you're never going to be able to keep up with what who you've given access to what. So I don't really think you've got a choice. So I did my my master's thesis on something called self-sovereign identity. So back to what you were saying, you own your identity. I may say to my work, you're allowed to look at certain parts. You may want to look at where I live. You might want to look at that data. I might go out. For instance, I get stopped by a policeman driving down the road, right? They want to know whether I've got a driving license. I can authorise law enforcement to look at the fact that I've got a driving license. But then I might say, well, actually, why do you need to know where I live, right? I don't know the legalities of that or not, but it gives you those opportunities. But once again, if you start doing things like that, you're never going to be able to keep up with what. So you need some sort of intelligence. Once again, it can gather data from lots of different places, but this agent will learn what you do, will learn what you like, will learn what's important to you, and should be able to make really good decisions. And I suppose there'll be some sort of veto, right? If they're about to sign you up to, if they're about to resign and get you a new job because they've seen something, then you might want to rein that back. So, yeah, I think it's a fascinating subject. I think there's lots of different use cases and lots of different concerns for people in doing something like that. Yeah.
But hopefully, as we've discussed today, people can go back to what's available now, but obviously it shows the importance of starting now, right? So looking at those tools, understanding those use cases, understanding how AI-powered security can help organisations right now, and putting those basics and those steps to get you towards, whatever it may be in the future. And
it is starting now, but as we know, things are going to look different in 6 months' time, right?
Yeah.
So it's about, I suppose, starting that journey. But you've still got to be agile in terms of, you start with your use cases. Doesn't mean you can't change them, right? Because there may be some compelling technology, some compelling use cases that come out. But start with a known scope, and then work from there.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining me today. It's been
thank you.
Really good discussion. So thank you. So thank you for tuning in to OCTO Talk. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and gained valuable insights into the world of technology. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on our social media platforms for the latest updates and exclusive content. Until next time, stay curious and keep innovating.